They say discipline is doing what you must, even when you don't feel like it. But that definition misses something vital. True discipline isn't about force. It's about relationship, the one you have with your own resistance. Every person who has ever tried to change their life has met that quiet, invisible opponent, the small voice that whispers, "Not now." That voice isn't laziness. It's fear, disguised as comfort. The fear that if you start, you might fail. Or worse, that you might become someone you no longer recognize. Most people think they need motivation. They wait for energy, inspiration, the right morning routine. But discipline begins where motivation ends. Motivation excites you. Discipline stabilizes you. It's the slow turning of the wheel, even when the fire goes out. It's the small agreement with yourself that you will not disappear on your own promises again. And that quiet vow, kept in the dark, is where self-respect is born. Discipline is rarely dramatic. It's found in moments that look unimportant to others, when you choose silence over scrolling, reading over reacting, presence over distraction. It's not a performance. It's a private act of loyalty to your future self. People misunderstand discipline as harshness, but it's really tenderness with direction. To hold yourself steady when the emotional waves rise. That's love in its mature form. You've been taught to associate discipline with deprivation, as if every act of restraint is self-punishment. But what if it's actually devotion? Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you repair a fragment of self-trust that broke long ago. Each repetition of effort is you telling your nervous system, "We are safe enough to keep moving." That's not punishment. That's reparenting. Some people mistake their lack of discipline for moral weakness. But what's often missing isn't willpower. It's clarity. You cannot stay consistent with what feels meaningless. When your goals are rooted in shame or comparison, discipline crumbles because pain cannot sustain purpose for long. The only kind of discipline that lasts is the one built on genuine alignment, when what you're doing reflects who you want to become, not who you're trying to prove yourself against. If this feels familiar, stay with me. There's a reason it's so hard to keep promises to yourself. Somewhere along the line, you learned that other people's approval mattered more than your own rhythm. Maybe every accomplishment was praised only when it pleased someone else. Maybe you discovered that rest was guilt, that perfection was safety. So you built your discipline on fear and called it ambition. But fear-based discipline burns out because it's rooted in anxiety, not choice. You can only push yourself for so long before your body starts pushing back. Real discipline feels different. It's not a constant grind. It's a quiet consistency. It's waking up and remembering that you are the architect of your own rhythm, not its prisoner. It's choosing to do the small, unglamorous tasks, not because they are thrilling, but because they are sacred repetitions that sculpt character. Every disciplined act is a vote for your future identity. And identity is what truly sustains effort. People often ask, how do I become more disciplined? But the better question is, what am I afraid will happen if I finally follow through? Because underneath every hesitation lives a hidden fear that you'll lose comfort or control or the story that's kept you small. Discipline is dangerous because it dismantles excuses. It shows you how much power you actually have. And power can be terrifying when you've spent years convincing yourself you're helpless. You might think you need a new system, a planner, a routine. But what you really need is forgiveness. Forgiveness for every time you said, "I'll start tomorrow." Forgiveness for all the plans abandoned halfway through. Forgiveness for believing your inconsistency made you unworthy. Because only when you forgive the self that quit can you trust the self that continues. The past, you wasn't lazy. They were scared, tired, or unready. Discipline doesn't demand you hate them. It invites you to understand them. Notice how self-discipline always begins in the body. The moment you hesitate, your chest tightens, your stomach twists, your breath shortens. That's the nervous system bracing for discomfort. The body equates change with threat. To be dangerously disciplined, you must learn to stay steady in that storm, to breathe, to soften, to move forward anyway. Discipline isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to carry it differently. When you start practicing this, something subtle happens. The noise of hesitation begins to fade. The energy you once spent on guilt and indecision returns to you. Life feels lighter, not because it's easier, but because your inner conflict is quieter. The task didn't change. Your relationship to it did. You stopped fighting the part of you that resists and started listening to it. That listening is power. That's how discipline becomes compassion in motion. You'll notice another shift. Your standards start to feel natural. What once felt forced becomes your baseline. This is the transformation most people miss. They want the results of discipline without the identity shift it requires. But every habit, done enough times, becomes part of who you are. You don't force yourself to brush your teeth. You just do. That's the level of automation. True discipline aims for, not effort forever, but eventual ease. The danger in discipline is not that it makes you rigid. It's that it makes you powerful enough to live without excuses. When you no longer negotiate with your own comfort, the world loses its leverage over you. People who rely on your inconsistency to feel secure start to feel uneasy. You'll be told you've changed. And you have. Because discipline strips away everything that's not essential. It makes you unrecognizable to those who benefited from your hesitation. And yet, the deeper danger of discipline is subtler. When you realize how capable you are, you must also confront how long you lived pretending you weren't. That grief hits hard. Every time you act with discipline, you mourn a version of yourself that didn't believe in you. But that mourning is sacred. It's the cost of resurrection. Still, there's a temptation here to swing too far into control, to equate discipline with domination. But force eventually fractures the self. Sustainable discipline feels like alignment, not suppression. It's not about silencing emotion. It's about guiding it. The strongest people aren't those who never waver. They're those who keep choosing, despite the wavering. And when you finally begin to live that way, steadily, quietly, relentlessly, you'll notice something strange. Life stops demanding so much explanation. You no longer need to announce your goals. You just act. People start to sense something different in you. Not loud confidence, but quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't ask permission. That's the mark of dangerous discipline. But before you reach that calm, there's an inner breaking that must occur. The moment you realize no one is coming to rescue you from your own inconsistency. That realization is terrifying, but also freeing. Because once you see that, you stop waiting to be saved. You become the one who shows up every day, every moment. And right there, in that silent vow to return, your life begins to change again. It's strange how discipline first feels like confinement, and then becomes freedom. In the beginning, it feels like sacrifice, the giving up of small pleasures, the denial of comfort. But over time, you realize you're not losing anything. You're trading chaos for clarity, noise for peace. The discipline that once felt restrictive becomes the structure that holds your creativity, your power, your calm. Most people never get that far because they mistake emotion for instruction. They believe that if they don't feel like it, it means they shouldn't. But emotions are weather. They shift constantly. Discipline is climate. It's the atmosphere you choose to live in, regardless of weather. When you understand that, consistency stops being a struggle. It becomes an environment. The real secret to discipline isn't hard work. It's attention. What you attend to, you strengthen. Every time you honor your commitments, you're teaching your brain that follow-through is your natural state. Every time you break them, you're rehearsing self-betrayal. The body remembers both. So the task isn't to be perfect, it's to keep rehearsing alignment until it becomes reflex. You may notice, too, that discipline reveals your hidden dependencies. It exposes what you use to escape your own discomfort. The scrolling, the snacking, the overthinking, the need for validation. Each time you resist these impulses, you meet your raw self, the one who has no numbing left. That meeting is uncomfortable because it's honest, but that honesty is where self-respect grows roots. When you start living with that level of self-respect, people will treat you differently. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy shifts from seeking to choosing. You stop chasing validation because you've built evidence of your own reliability. You trust yourself. And self-trust is magnetic. It changes how others experience you. There's beauty in this, but also solitude. Discipline will often feel lonely because few understand the quiet joy of structure. You'll watch others float from impulse to impulse, and part of you will envy their ease. But you'll also sense the instability beneath it. Freedom without grounding becomes chaos. You'll begin to cherish your routine, not as a cage, but as a sanctuary. Yet even within that sanctuary, discipline requires renewal. You can't build it once and forget it. It's a daily conversation with yourself. Who do I want to be today? Some days, the answer comes easily. Others, it feels buried under exhaustion and noise. But that's when discipline becomes spiritual, when it's no longer about productivity, but integrity. To be dangerously disciplined means to treat every action as a vote for who you are becoming. It means that every choice, no matter how small, carries weight. Washing the dishes, showing up on time, turning off the phone. Each act whispers, "I am trustworthy." And that whisper accumulates until it becomes your inner voice. Still, the mind will test you. It will whisper temptations wrapped in logic. You deserve a break. You've earned this skip. And sometimes, that's true. Rest is not the enemy of discipline. It's part of it. But rest is intentional. Avoidance is reaction. The difference lies in whether you choose it consciously or drift into it unconsciously. Notice how the disciplined live. They rarely announce, but they always arrive. They're not loud about their focus. It simply radiates. They don't talk about what they'll do tomorrow because they're too busy doing today. Their calm is not natural. It's practiced. Their power is not genetic. It's chosen, one repetition at a time. And yet, beneath that calm lies a private tenderness, because discipline teaches humility, the awareness that you're always one decision away from slipping. That's what keeps the disciplined gentle. They know the battle never ends, only deepens. Sooner or later, you'll face that same battle. The choice between what's easy and what's essential. Each time you choose the essential, you sharpen your will. Each time you choose the easy, you dull it. The danger of discipline is that it makes you aware of your own agency. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can no longer blame time or mood or others. You recognize that everything depends on your return. That realization can feel heavy, but it's also liberating, because when responsibility is fully yours, so is power. You no longer wait for ideal conditions. You create them. You don't pray for motivation. You manufacture momentum. You stop saying, "I hope," and start saying, "I decide." And one day, without even noticing, you'll look back at the version of yourself who struggled to begin, and you'll feel something like compassion, not judgment. You'll realize that every false start was a rehearsal. Every failed attempt was proof that you kept caring. That tenderness for your past self, that's the final sign of true discipline. Because in the end, discipline isn't about control. It's about care. Deep, deliberate, mature care. Care enough to say no to what dulls you. Care enough to protect your potential from your own avoidance. Care enough to keep showing up, even when no one's watching. That kind of care is dangerous because it makes you unstoppable. And yet, even now, something in you may whisper, "But what if I fail again?" Stay with that question. Failure doesn't end discipline. It deepens it. When you fail and still return, you move from performance to authenticity. You stop seeking to be flawless and start aiming to be faithful. The disciplined aren't perfect. They're consistent in returning. That's what makes them dangerous. You can't defeat someone who keeps coming back. This is where most people give up. In the quiet discouragement after breaking a streak, missing a day, slipping into old habits. They mistake interruption for ending. But real discipline understands rhythm. The inhale and exhale of effort and rest. You don't quit breathing because you exhale. You return. That's the nature of growth. So when you lose momentum, don't panic. Don't spiral into shame. Just return. Every return is proof of transformation. The undisciplined person gives up after breaking. The disciplined one rebuilds. Over time, that rebuilding becomes instinct. You'll notice that the longer you stay consistent, the simpler life becomes. Choices that once felt heavy become automatic. Discipline declutters the mind. You no longer debate with yourself. You just act. That mental quiet is intoxicating. Not the thrill of victory, but the calm of integrity. But here's something few admit. The more disciplined you become, the more compassion you need. Because it's easy to turn your standards into weapons against yourself or others. You might start to resent those who don't move as you do, or punish yourself for every small lapse. That's not mastery. That's fear, wearing discipline's clothing. Real mastery is flexible. It bends without breaking. Remember, discipline without softness becomes rigidity. Softness without discipline becomes drift. You need both, structure and surrender. That balance is what makes your discipline sustainable, humane, and alive. And when you live this way, something profound begins to unfold. Your focus becomes your prayer. Your routine becomes your sanctuary. You stop seeking external validation because the act itself fulfills you. Work becomes worship. Simplicity becomes power. You start to feel it, that hum beneath your skin, the awareness that you can rely on yourself, that you are not at the mercy of mood or chaos, that you are capable of carrying yourself through any storm. That realization changes everything. Because the moment you trust your own steadiness, life stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like creation. Discipline, in its deepest form, is not about achieving more. It's about becoming whole. Each act of follow-through gathers the scattered pieces of you and pulls them into alignment. That's why the disciplined often seem calm, not because life is easier for them, but because they are no longer divided within themselves. And yet, even then, there's more to see. Because discipline doesn't end with self-mastery. It ripples outward. The more reliable you become, the more others can depend on you. The steadiness you cultivate in yourself becomes safety for those around you. Your presence teaches, without words, this is what it looks like to be anchored. Perhaps that's what the world needs most. Not louder leaders, but steadier ones. People who move with quiet consistency, who do what they said they would, who let their lives be proof of their principles. That's the true danger of discipline. It's contagious. It awakens something ancient in others, the memory that they, too, were built to be steady. So as you listen to these words, maybe something in you is stirring. That quiet knowing that you've delayed your own becoming for long enough. Not out of weakness, but out of fear of your own power. That fear is normal. But it's time to meet it differently. You don't need to become harsh. You don't need to become robotic. You simply need to decide, gently, repeatedly, relentlessly, that your word matters. That every small action carries weight. That showing up for yourself is not negotiable. You are capable of dangerous discipline, the kind that moves silently, restores self-respect, and changes everything it touches. And perhaps the question now isn't how to start, but what part of you are you finally ready to trust enough to begin? Because that's where all discipline begins, in the quiet, unglamorous decision to trust yourself again.